This episode is part of the pool's Local Officials Stronger Together podcast series. It's one way we serve local officials through integrity, public service, fiscal responsibility, and operational excellence. As always, please direct specific questions about coverage to your risk management advisor.
Welcome to the Local Officials Stronger Together podcast series. I'm your host, Scott Houston. In January of 2020, in Lubbock, a driver from the opposing lane of travel crossed the median while emergency crews were working the scene of an accident. A firefighter and a police officer were killed on the scene, and a second firefighter was critically injured. That firefighter tragically passed away earlier this year. In this episode, I'll visit with Lubbock Firefighter Brady Robinette about the use of specialized helmets by first responders working roadway incidents. Of that accident scene, Brady asked these questions. If those involved were wearing helmets constructed according to standards designed to protect their heads against the impacts they experienced, would the results have been different? Would the head injuries have been less serious? Those questions have led Robinette to make it his mission to educate local officials about this issue. We've only got 15 minutes, as usual, so let's jump right into our discussion with Brady. Then, as always, we'll do your action items to help you get everything you can from our partnership. Well, I'm joined by Brady Robinette. Welcome, Brady.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Outstanding. Hey, tell me a little bit about your background.
As far as the fire department goes, I started volunteering 17 years ago with Wolfhurst Fire and EMS and did that for a few years and then thought, oh man, they would pay me to do this full time. And so, yeah, that's what I did and got my certifications and then got on Lubbock Fire Rescue as my full-time paid job about 13 years ago.
Awesome. And you're a lieutenant now?
Yep, a lieutenant at Lubbock Fire.
Outstanding. Well, we're here to talk about head protection for first responders like you and also other folks who work in and around roadways. Tell me, when did you become passionate about better head protection for folks who are doing that work?
Well, it was unfortunately due to a tragedy we suffered on January 11th of 2020. Crews were working a car wreck on the northbound lanes of I-27 north of Lubbock. They had several blocking vehicles blocking the direction of travel, a couple fire trucks, and I think a police cruiser. You know, seemingly a routine car wreck. And I say routine because we respond on a lot of these. The only difference that day was there was some weather that rolled through, so there was some spotty icing. But, you know, as they were working that scene, a vehicle traveling southbound, I guess lost control, crossed the median, and struck our responders. That vehicle struck and killed Lieutenant Paramedic Eric Keel and Lubbock Police Officer Nicholas Reyna. That same vehicle also struck and critically injured firefighter Paramedic Matt Dawson. Matt had broken bones all across his body, but his overriding injury was his traumatic brain injury. Doctors in the human body can heal broken bones, but the same can't be said for the brain. It doesn't heal so well, and so that traumatic brain injury was Matt's overriding brain injury that he was trying to recover from and rehab from. And I'm sad to say, unfortunately, Matt passed away in November of 2023, so a few months ago. Matt and Eric both had their structural firefighting helmets on that day, but the force of getting struck by that vehicle knocked their helmets off their head, thereby providing zero protection. I personally believe that Matt would still be alive today if he would have had a helmet on that provided appropriate head protection. But, you know, so to answer the question, after that incident, I said something needs to be better done in the area of head protection.
Right. Well, those guys were TMO risk pool members, and we're familiar with their stories, the tragedies of their stories through the workers' comp process that we went through with them. Tell me, what have you learned after that incident? What kind of research have you done, and what have you learned about better head protection for these folks?
Well, I think to recap what I've learned is, and one of the most important things is helmets do a very good job at performing their their job, which is protecting the head. This is why football players, race car drivers, pit crews, motorcyclists, bicyclists, skateboarders, snowboarders, our military men and women, and and many, many other sports and industries all wear a helmet when there's a danger of a head injury. Any energy absorbed by a helmet is energy not transferred to the head, and this thereby saves lives. It reduces the severity of injuries, and in the best case scenario, prevents any head injury at all from occurring. Since January 11th, 2020, and due to the research that I did, my paid department, Lubbock Fire and Wolford Fire and EMS, my volunteer department, have adopted roadway helmets, and they purchased it for all personnel. And there's several other organizations across the nation that have done the same. I'll mention a couple of them, but Irving Fire Department, Grand Prairie Fire Department, UMC EMS, our EMS transport agency up here in Lubbock, have all done the same. They purchased roadway helmets for all their personnel.
Well, when you and I were talking earlier before we started recording, we talked a little bit about something we have in common, which is riding dirt bikes. And we'd be crazy to go ride even on the dirt, right, without having a helmet on.
Yeah, nobody does that. that would be crazy. And me personally, with my experiences, I think the same thing about working on the roadway. I think it's crazy not to have a helmet on. But yeah, racing dirt bikes, I've crashed many times. I've crashed and hit my head on a tree and got up and finished the race. And that's just, what a helmet does. It protects you, and they're really good at it. And I think we ought to give it more thought when working on the roadway.
For sure. And you told me, you described these helmets that these agencies have bought as roadway helmets. Tell me what that kind of helmet is like.
Yeah, and so I'll contrast it first with what kind of the helmets currently worn on the roadway, if any, are, and that's a firefighting helmet or a hard hat. Those are the most common types of helmets currently worn on the roadway. Well, those helmets are designed to protect against falling objects, so impacts, from the top down. They have a webbing suspension system in it. Any helmet with a webbing suspension system is really good at providing top-down impact protection. If we're talking about getting struck by a vehicle, we're more likely to get hit on the side of the head. And another thing about firefighting helmets and hard hats is they don't typically stay on the head very good. Just like I mentioned, Eric and Matt's helmet came off. A hard hat's the same way. They just don't stay on the head good. And so, what I think a good roadway helmet looks like is it would have a good 4-point chin strap / retention system so that it stays on the head in place when it's needed most. And it also should have foam on the inside as opposed to the webbing suspension system like hard hats and structural firefighting helmets. So the foam on the inside is really the standard for any type of like crash or impact type helmet. If we think like a motorcycle helmet, a bicycle helmet, a skateboarding, snow sports, they all have foam on the inside. And foam is what we'd want when we're working on the roadway. And a good roadway helmet should also cover a larger portion of the skull than the firefighting or hard hat. So, if an area of the head's not covered by the helmet, of course it can't be protected. And those two helmets sit high on the head. And so we would want a helmet that provides more physical coverage also.
As we kind of wrap up, it's always really quick, I know, but you've given us some great information. Tell me, what's the ultimate goal of these efforts that you're doing?
So my ultimate goal is mass adoption of roadway helmets for anybody that works around moving traffic. So another way to say that would be anybody that wears a high visibility vest should also be wearing a roadway helmet.
That's awesome. Is there anything else that you'd like to add before we drop off?
Yeah, just a couple things. I think many folks don't like change. I think I'm oftentimes, have that anti-change mindset. Adopting a roadway helmet could be something that at first thought many wouldn't be in favor of, but I encourage you to give this topic deeper thought and consideration. A helmet is a really cheap insurance policy to protect the most important organ in the body, the brain. These struck by injuries, deaths and damaged vehicles, emergency vehicles or city vehicles, they're happening on a nearly daily basis across the nation. As roadways get more congested and drivers have become more distracted, these are presumably only going to get worse. I think we need to provide the training and protection / PPE for our personnel, and this includes head protection.
Well, Brady, we really applaud your efforts, and I appreciate you coming on the show today. Thanks so much for doing it.
Yeah, thank you.
let's just do 2 action items today. Action item number 1 is if you have more questions about these helmets and Brady's efforts, how can they contact you, Brady?
Yeah, feel free to reach out to me directly, and I'd be happy to present to your department, your organization. Be happy to exchange, just email communications with you. But I think email would probably be the best way. And my email is brady.d@gmail.com. So brady.d.robinette@gmail.com.
Okay, outstanding. We'll be sure to put that email address under the podcast as well. For action item number 2, Brady has told me that there's a new standard that's come out for these helmets.
It's a standard published by ASTM, and ASTM is a global standards body. And so the standard is called a specification for protective helmets worn by pedestrian roadway workers.
All right. And so that standard has been updated recently. And you mentioned that there may not be helmets that are available right now that meet that standard?
Yeah, that's correct. It was published just a few weeks ago. And so, unfortunately, there's no helmet on the market that meets that new standard. First, a helmet manufacturer would have to design and manufacture a helmet, then send it through the verification/certification process through ASTM. That'll definitely take some time. One of my biggest fears is no helmet ever reaches the market that meets this new standard. And that could happen if there's not interest in, the different disciplines that work on the roadway, calling their helmet manufacturers, expressing their interest. That could happen. And so what I would say in the meantime is select from a helmet that's currently on the market, like my agencies did and those others. And then someday, if a helmet does come out on the market that meets this new standard, then start working towards acquiring that helmet.
Okay, that's it. Check out the information under the podcast to learn more. Thanks for being our partner, and be sure to tune in to another episode soon.
To review written materials associated with the presentation or to ask Scott a question, please visit www.tmlirp.org and click on the Stronger Together podcast link. Please remember that the information in this episode is provided for informational purposes only and doesn't constitute legal advice. We recommend that you review the podcast and the accompanying written materials with your attorney prior to taking action.